Hello all, this is Anis with you. Welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to see what is JWT and we are going to create a JWT secured API server project and a API web client project to access the secured API by passing the JWT tokens. What is a JWT? JWT stands for JSON Web Tokens. JWTs are most commonly used to identify an authenticated user. They are issued by an authentication server and are consumed by the client server to secure its APIs. JSON Web Token is an open industry standard used to share information between two entities. Usually a client, it can be a mobile app or desktop app or a MVC web app or whatever, and a server, usually an API server or a web application. JWT contain JSON objects which have the information that needs to be shared. Each JWT is also signed using cryptography hashing technology to ensure that the JSON contents, also known as JWT claims, cannot be altered by the client or a malicious party. Why JWT is called self-contained tokens? The JWT can contain the user's details, not just a session ID like a cookie, but other custom data such as username, departments, even permissions, together with the token's expiry time. So you don't need to query a database for that information. This is completely unlike an opaque token, which by its very nature, it's just a meaningless jumble of alphanumeric characters. How JWT tokens saves database space and improve database performance? JWT tokens are stored only on the client. The server generates the token and sends them to the client, but the server did not save the tokens anywhere. The client then submits the JWT with every request. This saves database space and performance because the server does not need to query the database to validate the token. If this seems to be very confusing, no worries, we will understand better while doing the application. So let's start developing the application. Start Visual Studio 2022 and click the button labeled as Create a New Project. Then select ASP.NET Core Web API and click the Next button. In here, give the project name as JWT Test. After that, set the location as C:/JWT Test and leave the checkbox labeled as Place Solution and Project in the same directory. And then click the Next button. And in here, select the framework as .NET 7.0 Standard Term Support. Then leave the authentication type to none. And then leave the checkbox labeled as Configure for HTTPS as checked. After that, leave the checkbox labeled as Use Controllers as checked. Then leave the checkbox labeled as Enable Open API Support also as checked. Then click the Create button and wait for the scaffolding task to complete. After that, click the View menu and click the Solution Explorer. Then click the NuGet Package Manager and select the menu labeled as Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And here click the Browse tab. In the search box, type Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.JWT Then press the Enter key and select the first item from the search results. From the right hand side, check the JWT test project from the projects listing grid and click the install button to start the installation. In case if you are prompted with the preview changes dialog box, press OK. Then press I accept in the license acceptance dialog box and wait for the installation to complete. After that, search for Microsoft.IdentityModel.Tokens in the NuGet package manager for solutions. Then select the latest version and click install in the same way. After that, browse for system.identitymodel.tokens.jwt and install it also in the same way. Now we have installed all the required packages. Then open the app-settings.json and create a section named JWT after the allowed hosts. After that, create 3 key value pairs named key, issuer and audience inside the JWT section. And then set some secret complicated text value for the key. This is very important and this is like password for your JWT token. Never share this key to anyone. Next, set some value to the issuer. Basically, it can be the company name or the company URL or your name. I used my name here. Then the next item is audience. The audience value is very important. Many programmers get confused on this topic. They don't understand the real purpose of this. Audience tells for which app the API server is created for. By end of this tutorial, we will create 2 API servers, one with audience as customers and the other is for suppliers, so that the customers cannot access the suppliers API and the suppliers cannot access the customers API. It is going to be very interesting, so please stay tuned. Okay, now we are done with the app-settings.json file, and next open the program.cs file. In here, first declare a variable named tkconf and load the JWT section of the app-settings.json into it. After that, create the token validation parameters. This is very important. This tells the server on how to validate the received token from the client. If you get errors like me, then add Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.authentication.jwt namespace followed by the Microsoft.IdentityModel.Tokens namespace and system.text namespace to the using section. Wow, now the errors are disappeared. Let's see the parameters one by one. Set the validate issuer equals to true. This makes the server to check the issuer of the token. If you really don't want to check the issuer, then you can make this as to false. Then set the validate audience to true so that it checks the audience claim of the received token. Then next is validate lifetime parameter. Set this key always to true so that the server rejects the expired tokens. After that, set the validate issuer signing key parameter to true. This is also very important, so please keep this always to true. After that, load and set the valid issuer and valid audience parameters from the tkconf variable. And then load the JWT passphrase key from the tkconf and then create the symmetric security key and set it to the issuer signing key parameter. This key will not be sent with the JWT key so that no one can tamper the JWT key, but they can decrypt and see the contents of the JWT key. That also I will show how to do later in this video. Then the next line is very important line. Add the JWT bearer authentication to the builder.services as shown. After that, in the program.cs file, we need to add app.useAuthentication and app.useAuthorization middlewares just above the app.mapControllers middleware. Okay, now we are done with the program.cs file. And next, let's create a model to pass the username and password. Actually, we can pass this without model also, I mean simply as parameters. But it is better practice to pass it through models. So let's create a model and name it as login model. This login model will have only two properties named as username and password. Both the properties are of type string. Then delete the weather forecast model and the weather forecast controller which came up with the scaffolding task. We don't need this anymore. And next, let's create a controller and name it as login controller. Make sure you select and create the API controller and not the MVC controller. Notice the route attribute of the controller. It should be API/controller and it should also have the API controller attribute in the head of the class name. And now add the authorize attribute to the class. Here we are setting the authorization level in the class so that all the methods of the class will need an authorization token or identity. Then declare a private read-only variable of type iConfiguration. And then add the constructor method with the iConfiguration parameter and set this parameter value to the read-only variable underscore config. And next add a method with the HTTP post web and name it as login. Actually, the name can be anything. Here only the web matters. Then add a parameter named as login of type login model. This parameter we will receive from the body section of the HTTP request. That's why we put from body before the parameter. Next, we want to make this method available for everyone. So add the attribute allow anonymous to the head of the method. After that, we need to create a method named as generate token. To this method, we pass the username and create the JWT token. To generate the token, first we need to get the key from the config.get section of JWT key. After that, we should encrypt the key using the SHA-256 algorithm. Then create the claims array. Here we are not using the claims, so we can set the claims parameter as null also. I will create a separate tutorial for claims and roles very soon. For now, just pass the username as the claim to the claims array. Okay, now we are ready to create our token. So declare a variable named as token and set it to the new of JWT security token by passing the required parameters. Notice here I have set the validity for the token as 15 minutes. You can set the validity as per your requirement. Then return the created token to the caller method using the write token method of the JWT security token handler class. After that, go to the login method and write the login credentials checking code. If the login name and password is valid, then create the token and return the token inside the OK response. In case login failed, then return the bad request response code with the message as login failed. Then next, let's create a method named as test. This method is a secured method so that it cannot be accessed without passing the token. If a valid token is passed, then this method will return the OK result with a message saying token validated successfully. Otherwise, it will throw an error saying 401 unauthorized. Okay, our project is done. Let's run and check the application. Here, First, I am trying to call the test method without logging in. Click the try it out button followed by the execute button. Notice it has thrown the 401 unauthorized error. Now let me log in by calling the post method. In the request body JSON, enter username as Anis and password as 123456. After that, let's press the execute method. Notice the login is success and we successfully got the JWT token. This token is valid for 15 minutes. Now press the get button and then click the try it out button. After that, press the execute button. Still, we get the 401 unauthorized error. This is because we did not pass the token and there is no option in the Swagger interface to pass the tokens. Actually, there is an issue in the Swagger UI configurations in .NET 6 and above. To fix that, we need to do a lengthy workaround and it is out of the scope of this tutorial. So, to make things simple, I have made a API web client project just like Postman. Please download this project from the shown URL or else use the Postman instead. After downloading the web client project, extract and run it. Now press the create button and then copy and paste the API URL to the API address text box. After that, click the create button. As expected, we got the error saying response code is unauthorized. This is because we did not pass the token. The same issue happened in Swagger UI also. Okay, press the back button of the browser. And then go to the Swagger UI and log in using the username and password. Then copy the token string to the clipboard. Then come back to the code as web client interface. And then paste the token to the JWT token text box. Then press the create button. Perfect. This time the API call is completed with the success code. So our JWT authorization works fine. But this is the basic way. Still the tutorial is not completed. I want to teach more about JWT to you. So please stay on. So far we are only using the JWT bearer. But how to integrate JWT bearer with the ASP.NET Core identity so that we can create JWT tokens for the authenticated users. To do that, first let's install the Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. So go to Tools, then click NuGet Package Manager, then click Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And then here click Browse tab. After that, enter EF Core SQL Server in the search box. Then select and install the first result, which is Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. Since we are using .NET 7, select the latest package for .NET 7. As of this recording, the latest version is 7.0.5. Okay, now click the install button. If you are prompted with the preview changes dialog box, then click OK. After that, click I accept in the license acceptance dialog box. Okay, now Fcore for SQL Server is installed successfully. Next, we need to install the Microsoft.asp.core.identity.entity framework core. So, in the NuGets Solution Managers Browse tab, enter Microsoft.asp.netcore.identity.entity framework core in the search box. Then select the first search result and press the install button. And click OK in the preview changes dialog box in case if you are prompted. After that, click I accept in the license acceptance dialog box. Okay, now the identity framework core is also installed successfully. Next, we need to install the Core tools. So type Core tools in the search box. Then select the Microsoft.entity framework core.tools from the search result and click the install button. Press OK in the preview changes dialog box. Then click I accept in the license acceptance dialog box. Perfect. Now all the required packages are installed. So we are ready to program. Now open the app settings.json file and add the connection string section and add the connection string for your DB. Please notice the connection string carefully. I am connecting to my local SQL server with the trusted connection and with the trusted certificates to the JWT test database. Use set as per your requirement or use the same as mine. After that, add the AppDB context class. To do that, right click the project in the Solution Explorer. Then click Add and then click New Item. In here, give the file name as appdbcontext.cs and click the Add button. And next, add the Entity Framework Core namespaces to the Using section. After that, inherit the appdb context from the identity DB context with the type as identity user. Then add the constructor method for the appdb context class as shown. And then open the program.cs file. After that, add the appdb context to the services collection using the command builder.services.appdb context. In case if you get the compile time errors like mine, add the JWT test namespace and the Microsoft.entity framework core namespace to the using section of the program.cs file. Then we need to do the database migration. So go to the package manager console window and here type add migration space create db and press enter. After that, type update-database to update the changes to the database. Now let's go to the SQL Server Management Studio and we will make sure that the database is created. Okay, the database is created successfully. We can see all the identity related tables in the database. Next, we need to modify our login controller to validate the username and password from the database. As of now, it is hard-coded. So, to do that, we need to create two private read-only variables of type sign-in manager and user manager. After that, we need to add user manager and sign-in manager parameters to the constructor method so that it will be served by the dependency injection. Then assign the parameter values to the read-only variables respectively. Then add a method named as authenticate. This is the method which will check the username and password using the sign-in manager, and if the user is validated, then it returns the retrieved user from the user manager, otherwise it returns null. Now we need to modify our login method to use the authenticate method for user validation. So change the login method as shown. Here we are checking for the user.result. The user.result will have the authenticated user or null. Then next we need to add the identity service in the program.cs file. So add the identity service below the addDB context method. Then we need to create a controller named as register controller. Using this controller, we will register the user. So create a API controller and name it as register controller. Then add the read-only variable of type user manager to the register controller. Next, add the constructor method to the register controller. Then create a method named as register which accepts two parameters named username and password. This is the method used for the new users to register the details. Please notice the method carefully. This method can be accessed by all, so add the allow anonymous attribute to the method head. Okay, now we are done with the project. Let's build and run the application. Let's click the post button followed by the try it out button to register our first user. Then enter username as Anis and password as 123456 and then press the execute button. Perfect, the user Anis is registered successfully. Let's cross check by going to the SQL Server Management Studio and browse the ASP.NET users table. Yes, we can see one user created in the ASP.NET users table. Now let's request the token from the login controller by passing the username and password. Let's enter the username as Anis and password as 123456 and then press the execute button. Perfect, we got the token now. Let's go to our code as web client to check the login API. Copy and paste the API URL to the API address and press the create button. Perfect, we got the response code not found. Actually, we are supposed to get 401 unauthorized response code, but it is okay. I will explain why we got not found response code. Now press the back button of the browser. Then copy and paste the token from the API server. Now press the create button. Oh, still we are getting the error response. What happened? Our project stopped working. But no worries, we will fix it. Actually, the problem is in the program.cs file. So open the program.cs file to fix the issue. Here, if you see, we have two authentication providers. One is ASP.NET Core Identity Provider and the other is JWT Bearer Authentication Provider. Since we use two providers, the authentication system conflicts and stopped working. So, to fix this issue, we need to tell the controller to use which authentication provider. So, open the login controller and scroll up to the top of the controller. Now comment the authorize attribute and then add the authorize attribute with the authentication schemes set to JWT bearer defaults.authentication scheme. Then build and run the application. Now first try clicking the get method from the Swagger user interface. Perfect. Now we are getting the response code as 401 unauthorized. Very good. And notice the expected authentication is set to bearer. Now copy the URL and paste it to our Is web client's API address text box. Then press the create button. Notice now we are getting the 401 unauthorized error here also. Then press the back button of the browser and go back to the API server project. And here click the post button and then press the try it out button. Then enter username as Anis and password as 123456. Then press the execute button. Perfect. We got the JWT token now. Copy the token to the clipboard and then go back to our Is web client project. Then paste the token and press the create button. Wow! Now we got the message saying token validated successfully. So the project is working fine. Now copy this token and go to JWT.io website. Then paste the copied token to the encoded text box as shown. See the payload text box shows all the claims of the token. We are able to see the expiry date and time. Then we are able to see the issuer and audience claim. So using these details, can someone create a similar token and will they be able to access our site? No, that's not possible because no one can decrypt the password key of the token. In our case, the password key is I am Anis from India, which is boxed in green. Without this key, no one will be able to make similar tokens and you can trust your site is safe. But if you give this key, then the key holders can make the duplicate tokens and can get the access to your site. So be careful and keep this key safe. Okay, then what's next? I need to explain you the purpose of the audience claim. So I will copy this project and paste it in a different folder and let's name that folder as JWT test dupe. After that, let's rename the project name also to JWT test dupe. And then open the JWT test dupe project. After that, open the launch settings.json file. In here, change the HTTP port to 7231 and then change the HTTPS port to 5317. And then change the application URL port of the IIS settings to 36241 and 44302 or whatever you like. Then after, open the app settings.json file. And here change the audience to supplier app. Okay, we are done now. Build and run the application. So now both the API servers are running side by side, and both the projects are sharing the same database and same password keys and same issuer, but they have different audiences. So let's log into the JWT test app and generate the key first. Then after, copy the API URL and the JWT key from the JWT test project and paste it to the Code as web client project. After that, click the create button to pass this key to the JWT test API server. Perfect, the key is accepted and working fine. Now press the back button of the browser. Then change the API address to point the JWT test do project API listening URL. Now press the create button to pass the same key to the JWT test dupe API server. Notice we got the error 401 unauthorized because this JWT key is for the JWT test server, and the JWT test dupe server is expecting a different audience claim. I mean supplier app claim, which is not there in this token. Because of that, it rejected the key. So from this tutorial, we have learnt lot about the JWT tokens and the API servers. But still lot of things to come, like roles, claims, and creating a API CRUD application using JWT tokens. So please wait for the part 2 of this tutorial, which will be uploaded very soon. With this, I am completing this video. Before I sign off, I request you to subscribe and share this video. I would appreciate if you would like and subscribe to this channel so that you will be notified for all of the new videos that I will be posting. Thank you and bye for now.